Greetings and welcome to this special webcast that we're doing for UC Today's virtual UC Summit 2020. My name is David Danto. I'm your host today. Most of you in the industry know me. I wear an awful lot of hats. I'm not representing any of them today. I'm your agnostic moderator. I'm often coming to you as the editor of Sound and Communications ITAV report, or with my role at the IMCCA, or my role as Poly. But it's my pleasure to be here and talk about our topic today, which is really going to be the concept of endpoints going forward into this new decade of 2020. We've just got our toes wet into the space right now. There are a lot of things in front of us, and I've got some tremendous guests on the line with us, and I'm going to ask them to each introduce themselves. So Robin, why don't we start with you? Tell everybody who you are and what you do in the industry, what you've done.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Hi, everybody. My name is Robin Gareiss. I am president of Nemertes Research, and happy to be here today. I generally, cover a variety of things, but communications and collaboration technology in general. I focus in very heavily on how companies are using these technologies to transform their organizations. So because of that, a lot of what I do ends up being focused on customer experience. How are they using these collaborative technologies to better communicate with their customers? And then, of course, how do they integrate that in with some of their employee collaboration capabilities as well? So happy to be here.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it. Tim, you want to go?
Sure, certainly. My name's Tim Banting. I'm principal analyst for Ovum. I work in the workspace services part of the business. So I look at the collaboration and communications vendors, what's going on in the marketplace, how the digital supply chain is being sort of connected up by all this collaboration and communications software. So looking at the whole supply chain, so suppliers, partners, customers, contingency workers, temporary staff, those sorts of things, but more from a business perspective now rather than just a technical.
Terrific. Thank you, Tim. Ed, a new guest from my webcast, but an old friend. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody what you're doing and what you've done?
Okay. Good morning, Dave and everyone. It's good to be here. Currently, I'm an analyst in residence at a firm called More Insights and Strategy. I focus on digital media and entertainment, unified communications and collaboration, and professional audio video related products and industries. Prior to that, I grew up in the high-tech space, started off as a software developer back in the day at IBM and worked up through the product management ranks, general management ranks, was the senior vice president of the video communications division at Polycom, and most recently was the CEO of a company that was owned by a private equity firm called Vadio that did professional audio, video, and switchers and controllers, pan-tilt zoom cameras, and also did UCC category products. So that's my background, and looking forward to the discussion today.
Terrific. And finally, Tom, why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody what you do and what you've done.
Sure. Thanks, David. Great to be here. Well, currently I hold the role of running all the product for our newly formed Poly, the combination of Plantronics and Polycom, which really gets me excited. That includes both hardware and software. Prior to that, I ran Cisco's collaboration business, specifically their UC business, which included IP phones, software, the BroadSoft acquisition, and the contact center business. Before that, I spent some time with Mr. Tim Banting at Microsoft for a little bit of time. So I've got a great set of experiences both in selling, installing, building, designing collaboration tools for the last 20 some odd years. Great to be here.
Okay, so as I told you, this is a great group of people. I'm going to start the question, and this is a free-for-all, so nobody raise their hands unless they'll just step all over each other. But I'm going to start this with this concept of unified communications. When I look back at my history, and I've written about this a number of times, it was the late 90s when that phrase was termed. I think it was in Wired magazine. It was talking about how IBM was doing it. We're still calling it unified communications or UC&C or collaboration. It's really anything but unified. If everybody on this call has been in the space for quite a long time. What do you think about the progression, just at a high level right now? Are we where we should be? Are we unified? Is it better? Is it a little better? Did it go off in a weird turn? Where do you guys think of the journey so far as we hit 2020?
Well, I'll go first,
go ahead.
David.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I won't. Will I? I'll try. Sorry, Robin. So, unified. I think, well, when we sort of look at the timeline, it was the turn of the century where unified communications meant that it was just unified on a single architecture for voice, video, and integrated data, according to Cisco. It was integrated onto IP. Or unified onto IP. I think all the clients were still very disparate. It just ended up being one single client almost to rule them all, if you were. I think where we're going now is more towards team collaboration, and I think we're moving more towards integrated communications rather than unified or integrated collaboration. I think by and large, a lot of the progression in the industry was really through acquisition or through the bringing together of all these different components into a single client. I think what's happening now is we're moving towards an integrated platform as opposed to a unified client or unified communications.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that we leap forward oftentimes without fixing problems that we've had prior to leaping forward. So, you asked, are we where we should be? I don't necessarily think we're where we should be. We are where we should be because we don't have all of the perfectly seamless integrations taking place yet. We keep adding more to the collaboration, list of applications that you can use, but we don't necessarily always fix the things that were broken before we add more on. I mean, when I look at how have things changed since the 90s when we were all covering this stuff, I mean, obviously the architecture's changed. More people are in the cloud now. More organizations are in the cloud. However, I will tell you, I still talk to far too many large organizations who are still using on-premises systems that they deployed in the early 2000s. So that's a little concerning. But I also think that we have an issue with UC in that I don't think companies do a good enough job measuring success. I think that we really need to understand from a business perspective, why is UC and collaboration something that we should continue to do and continue to invest in. In our research, we see that some companies are measuring this. So, of those who are measuring it, they were showing an average of about a 20% gain in employee productivity, which equates to about, just under 8 hours a week, which is pretty good, right? But it's not every company that's measuring that. It's a little bit hard to actually, measure in hard numbers. But I think that's something we need to do better on. And I also think that it's UC is something that's really never ending. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm done with my UC deployment, because it's always expanding. There are always new applications, new ways to use the technology. It's almost like a continual evolution.
Thank you. So I would really move this conversation at this point now over to the idea of endpoints and devices, which is what our focus in UC is going to be. And my first question is really, how are we describing an endpoint? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about, physical video conference systems? Are we talking about telephone sets? Are we talking about everything that does the analog to digital conversion? What is the space? I mean, honestly, in my personal opinion, I think the industry analysts are blowing this because, they're ignoring this concept of it being a space. If you don't have this traditional older definition of unified communications, your cloud, your service, your team chat application, most of the diagrams that we use in our industry without naming names are ignoring us. And I think this concept of endpoints, what are we using to communicate is going to be bigger, and that's why we're kind of talking about it today. Any thoughts, Ed? Do you want to go first on that one? Do you have anything top of mind around that idea?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. If I sort of combined your first topic and this second topic here together a little bit, clearly progress has been made from the 90s, where the data network infrastructure was its own world, and telecommunications, the phone systems were their own world, and then you had this video conferencing little niche thing sitting over there on its own island, and then you had instant messaging get into the equation, and then time moved across, and integration, IP drove a lot of that to all come together. And now we've moved into a world where there was basically two players, Tandberg and Polycom, and now we've moved into this hybrid world of we have the cloud services and we have the endpoints. This is allowing a lot of things to get integrated. It's not perfect, and it's got a long ways to go to really achieve perfection. But wow, compared to 5 years ago and 10 years prior to that, dramatic progress has been made. And there's even a higher level architecture of how software and infrastructure as a service is going to play, where the whole communications world will just be a part of that, as opposed to today we still think of it as you're logging into a service like Zoom or Microsoft, et cetera, as sort of a dedicated communications device. It's possible that as we move farther into the future that all of that just becomes a part of a service, it's a part of an overall big ecosystem in the cloud. Now, whether you agree with me on that, something like that is going to happen. And then the question comes down to your specific question now, which is what's going to happen specifically in the room. And in the room, things really are not that different. There's still lots of innovation to occur in the room with the endpoints in terms of the video quality and the audio quality and the interaction with what I would have historically called content, right? Which can come in many forms, whiteboards, presentations, all those kinds of things. And how you integrate that, there's still lots of room for integration in the room to make that long-term vision that we've all said, which is kind of like, if you use an NFL football game, a lot of times watching it on Fox or CBS is actually better than being there in person. And it's still the opportunity to make meetings like that, I believe, still exists, right? That there's an opportunity. Used to be if you were on video, or still is today, really, compared to the people in the room, you're a little bit of a third wheel there. And as we go forward, it's possible that, the video conferencing experience could actually be better than being there in person, or at least parity with it.
Yeah, and Tom, you have under your charge actually doing some of this. You're building some of this gear. Do you agree with that? Are we coming to the point where the endpoints are going to make the experience better than in person?
Great question. My goal is to eliminate the need for someone to get on an airplane or have to drive to an office if they don't want to, right? I mean, that's really, what we do in the video space is to make it as realistic and as interactive as it possibly can be without having to physically be there. I think Robin was talking about earlier this, have we answered the need of true unified communications? Have we gotten to where we need to be? What have we missed? And I totally agree with her. I think the industry, vendors, analysts, we keep moving the cheese. We keep finding something new to talk about, something new to sensationalize, and the core things that we once set off on, simply putting, voice on a data network or video on a data network that can be accessed by anyone, anywhere, still is the core value of unified communications, right? So where endpoints play in delivering of that service, it's huge. That interaction between the analog and the digital, that's for everything. Services in the cloud now are going to continue to get better and better and faster and more widely available. The devices that connect to those services are going to be what defines, it helps define that experience for the end user, whether it's a good one or a great one.
Well, we're kind of at a revolutionary point right now in the industry, in my opinion. Anyway, we're 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, as Ed, you pointed out, you had Polycom, you had Tandberg. You would buy those endpoints, and that would be your experience. You would get your services from them. You would get everything from them. That still exists with, Cisco and some of the other players in the space today where they want to get you the endpoint and give you the service and have that lock-in. And our industry is now finally at a moment where, you know what, you don't have to rip and replace the endpoints you're putting in, be they telephones, be they video systems, whatever. If you want to use Cloud Partner A this week, but Cloud Partner B comes to you with a better deal and a better contract, you can switch to Cloud Partner B and not have to do that rip and replace anymore. I think that's going to be a huge revolution in our industry, where the service providers are now going to have to compete on price and service and content, which is what it should have been all along, and that lock-in is gone. Anybody have thoughts around that? Am I making that wrong? Am I getting that right?
No, you're absolutely right, David. I think the other thing that we tend to neglect is who or the composition of the workforce and where they work. Where is their workplace? So, your workforce could be internal employees, they could be contingency workers, they could be temporary staff, they could be suppliers, they could be partners. Their workplace could be home, it could be the office. You could work in a centralized office, remote offices, you could work from a hotel room. It doesn't matter how elaborate or expensive the physical hardware endpoint is, you may have to join on the lowest common denominator, which might be a mobile phone. So the endpoint is everything. It's your mobile phone, it could be your tablet, it could be your laptop, it could be a specific endpoint in a huddle room, it could be telepresence, it could be anything. So this whole idea of a closed ecosystem, the likes of some of the big vendors can't control a mobile phone device. They're not an Apple, they're not an Android manufacturer. So the lowest common denominator, I think, will be software. In a lot of cases, there will be a need for an open ecosystem play for hardware vendors, that regardless of whatever vendor's platform you're connecting to, you have that flexibility. I think a lot more of that intelligence will go into that end hardware as well. So if I look at, for example, noise reduction in telephones, in IP phones, I have no idea why vendors haven't sort of cottoned onto that. It's been 20 years, and there's still no noise reduction in a basic handset from a number of vendors. It makes no sense whatsoever that they put more priority on having a speakerphone. That's no use to me in an open plan office. I want noise reduction, and yet it's taken the likes of perhaps Poly to come along and show why that's important.
Well,
so there's a big shift. There's a big shift.
Let's come back to that idea about what's going on with the technology and the actual devices. But I do want to give Robin and Ed a shot to talk about this concept of the divorcing of the endpoints and the platforms, and if you guys see it as revolutionary as I do.
Yeah,
I do. I mean, I think it is pretty revolutionary. I think a lot of it's just going to be really driven by customer demand. I mean, if you think about your interactions every day, and I think it's gone crazy just in the last year. I can't tell you the last time I've had a call where it has not been video. I was just talking to someone this morning, in fact, at work, who was just saying, boy, we had a call yesterday where it was audio only. It felt so weird, we couldn't see the people. So I think, when you were working in closed ecosystems, right, and it was just within your company, and you all had the same devices, and, that was sort of the expectation. Now, as we open up this ecosystem, and every call we do inside and outside the company is video, you don't know what system you're going to be using, you don't know what platform you're going to be using. Things all have to, the endpoints all do have to be interoperable, and I think that, we're really starting to see that. You've got Poly's ability to support multiple platforms. You've got, Cisco announcing that they're going to work with Zoom and Microsoft. You've got PEPSIC gateways. You've got, Zoom's native room connector. It's starting to happen. And I just think moving forward, there's really going to be no other way that that the vendors are going to be able to respond to customer demands. And if they don't, somebody's going to come in and do it for them. So I think we're already seeing that happening.
Terrific. Ed, any thoughts on that?
Well, sure, Dave. I think that it's always important to remember there's several vectors that drive the dynamics in the industry, right? There's technology itself, there's the actual customer requirements, and then there's the economics of all of it that play together. So if you go back to the mid 2000s, as you were commenting about Tandberg and Polycom being the sole, basically 75% of the market in terms of the providers for it, doing what we were thinking of today in the cloud as we think of it today was not possible in that window of time because the Xeon processors did not have the capability to do what an MCU that was based on DSPs could actually do. Whereas then along came multi-core on Xeons and normal curve of performance improvements. Now we're in a world where technologically it can be done, and not only technologically can it be done, it's economically more viable to do the old MCU functionality in the cloud, and it allows for new technology as it comes along to be integrated in a much more fashionable way, because when you're spreading it across lots of users, your ability to implement things faster and more cost effectively goes up. So this separation of the two is all driven by that, and the benefit to the end user is dramatic, and it's only going to get better as we as we move forward in time.
Tom, I'll give you the last word on that topic before we move on to gear.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, what you see coming out of our organization backs up what all of you are talking about. So obviously, we agree with this new separation, this new focus, and I think Tim said it's going to come down to software, and I 100% agree with that. The more you can pack into software, the better off you're going to be. I also believe that the better experiences that you deliver with these new devices that are optimized for Zoom or optimized for Microsoft, the better advantage you're going to have as a customer. Also, the choice that you're getting from vendors like Poly today, as an example, is just going to play to the end user. It's going to give them so much more choice, so much more flexibility. Price points are going to come down. And really the goal that I set off with is I want everybody to be able to join on a video call like this from wherever they're at, whether it's an airport, their home office. I mean, look at us. We're all in home offices right now. None of us had to get in the car and go anywhere. We didn't have to burn any carbon fuel. I mean, the power of these new technologies is going to be just awesome. and the experiences are just going to increase. I mean, I'm on the front end of this. I see 4K, 8K, 120-degree field of view cameras, multiple microphones. Just the experiences are getting just awesome.
Mm.
So let's talk a little bit about how the technology itself is going to influence these endpoints going forward. We are just now scratching the surface of what artificial intelligence and machine learning are capable of doing within some of these systems. You know, the AI and the ML are doing things that you know, oh my gosh, I wrote this in a blog recently, so I apologize if somebody's heard this before, but this is a true story. I was at the trade show in the 1990s where, you know, they were giving away these little miniature footballs, and in order to win one, you know, you had to be able to pick up the remote and dial a video call and make it successfully connect. And then they gave you a prize. And I still have it sitting here in my basement somewhere. And now, you know, there is no remote anymore. I'm stunned. I was just recently at a trade show where I brought one of actually the Eagle Eye Cube, but you know, the idea that you sit the camera down and it figures out who's talking and it takes a picture of them, and it figures out if somebody came into the room, and it makes the camera wider so you have a good shot. We're never going to have this I'm looking at your legs again, or the camera's aimed at the wall again, and that's just scratching the surface. I mean, the technology about how we're going to be able to, as Ed pointed out, make it better than in person. You know, will we have split screens with two people arguing so we can see what's going on? I'm going to just put this out there as a general question. Do you see this AI and machine learning, as the software gets better, really influencing these experiences? Is that going to be the big story in the 2020s of collaboration endpoints?
Yeah, that's something I'm so excited about, and just in the research we do, it seems like people are really focusing on this, paying attention to it. Not everybody has a strategy in place at this point. You know, I think in our last research, it was a little over 60% have a strategy for using AI and machine learning in their customer, you know, experience side of things. But it's so exciting. You know, think of the things you can do there. Improving performance, say, of a video call by detecting a network or sound circumstances that could be indicative of a problem brewing. You know, AI can learn from the past, like there was a problem before. So if some of these same circumstances start showing up in the same, you know, order, the same combination, we can maybe avoid a problem or fix a problem from happening before it actually takes place. You know what I mean? Really be able to look out into the future. You can get better utilization of speech analytics, for example, just having intelligence in the endpoints, simply because the sound quality would be better. You can better detect inflections in voices. You know, you can better detect when somebody's angry, or they're smiling when they're talking, or they're just really aggravated when they're talking. You know, you can really start doing things like that and helping the person on the other line. And I see this really as a big deal on the customer side of things. Just the ability of bots or virtual agents to make verbal suggestions to, let's say, a contact center agent without the customer hearing. I mean, you can do some of that today with, you know, Whisper and all that, but let's say it's AI enabled, you know, and it can tell that the customer is making some sounds over there. They're sighing. I may not be able to hear it because I'm talking, but now I'm going to get a little warning in my headset that might help smooth out that call. It might help me close a sale, or, you know, get a higher rating on my post-survey call, things like that. You know, video framing, you know, facial recognition. There's so much we can do here. I just think that this is probably the most exciting piece of what we're doing today, and what you know, product engineers are working on today.
Yeah, I agree with Robin that it's exciting. Oh, sorry, Tom. Beg your pardon. There we go. That's where AI would come in handy, wouldn't it? Detect when both people are talking, and I can give way to you.
Tim, go ahead. You start.
Thank you very much. So in terms of AI, I agree it's exciting. I believe that AI stands for artificially inflated, because it's an overhyped term. What I'd like to see is AI and ML disappearing in the background, and people start talking about the features that it offers and the benefits that it offers. And Robin was right to point out those sorts of things like automatic framing. So you've got your own virtual camera person in the room, as it were. Mm-hmm. Some of that noise detection that automatically drowns out dog barking or doorbells ringing or what have you. When they become features and AI as a technology disappears into the background, that's when I know that we've gone on to great things. Because at the moment, I think it's an overused term. It's very limited and narrow in scope, AI. I think there's a lot of people assuming it does all sorts of wonderful things, but the narrower the scope and the more that becomes more of a feature, and the term AI disappears into the background, I think that's when we know that we've hit the sweet spot.
Yeah, I agree with what Tim was saying, and Robin too, is that to the point Tim was making, is AI ML is such a general term. It's used as a filler. Just if I don't understand it, I'll just say the word AI and ML. We have that. And I think that we are in such an infancy in understanding what is possible with those technologies. And I'm talking about from a hardware perspective, from a modeling perspective, from an experience perspective. All three of those coming together is what's going to deliver those experiences that Robin was talking about and what Tim is hoping for. Those hardware processors are coming fast from all these different vendors that are going to enable native AI and ML processing right on the processor. That's going to allow more complex models. That's going to allow us to do a lot more complex things. From facial pose to everybody stares at a whiteboard and then the camera switches to the whiteboard. Just really intuitive things. But it's the blending of that technology, the memory, the models, the processing power, with all these magical experiences that Tim has been asking for. Is, you can marry those two together. That's when I think we realize the power of AI and ML. Until then, it's kind of like I said, it's a patchword for anything cool that we don't quite understand that could be coming, and we are definitely on the front of that. As I think of camera tracking as the baby steps, and being able to acoustically cut out dog barking, that is just the baby steps of what's going to be possible when you see the power of all these new processors coming. It's going to be really, amazing stuff.
But if you think about it, Tom, that's actually the proof point about what we were talking about before. If we're in an in-person meeting with 6 other people in the room, and there's a dog outside, or there's a siren that goes by, in the room, we're going to hear that dog, we're going to hear that siren. But if I'm on the other side of it, and we have an AI engine digitally extracting the dog or the siren, my experience of the conversation remotely is going to be better than if I was in the room.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. That's a great point. Yep.
And as we extrapolate, the data gets better, we get smarter, the systems get better. This is really a sky's the limit. And the kind of things we're talking about now with automatic framing and, automatic videographer built in and this acoustic treatment and everything else, that's today. That's 1 or 2 software releases away in this calendar year. And we're just starting the 2020s. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about where you think this is going to go. Ed, I see you nodding. Anything you're thinking about in this technology?
Well, no. First of all, I was motivated to hear that everybody sees the somewhat overhyped aspects of what AI and ML can do, because it really does carry an enormous potential. But today, if we just slap an AI sticker on there, we think it should sell. That's unfortunately what it did. We saw that in the mid-2000s when we came out with HD. All of a sudden, everybody had HD something, right? Even though it didn't make any sense what that meant. But nevertheless, we did it. But the part that relative to what everyone's thinking here that I find exciting is the benefits of the cloud here is that engineers, developers, and programmers are always bound by what's the raw performance compute that's available to them to actually do the function that we're all talking about, right? And when you have cloud computing, the ability for scalability on the amount of raw performance compute you can bring to a problem in a very cost-effective manner, it's not infinite, but for all practical purposes, it almost is infinite. And that is an enormous potential for lots of applications, and UCC being one of them. And then as the endpoint market continues to grow, the economics will change there, and we'll start seeing dedicated ASIC chips that do these AI ML things specifically for certain functions that will be able to be added into the endpoints. And you put those two things together, and that's pretty exciting stuff. What could be done there, and that's not pie in the sky 10 years from now. That's an 18 to 36 month window there that a lot of progress can be made in those areas.
It's going to be an exciting decade. I agree with all of you. I want to for a second go back to a point that Robin made and then just kind of extrapolate on it a little bit. The idea that while we've built all these new features onto the collaboration and UC and integrated platforms, we still haven't fixed all of the old problems. And, in the early 2000s, the video collaboration space used to be talking about quality, and everybody was saying quality was important. As you pointed out, HD, Ed, that was the thing. But nobody really wanted quality or HD HD. What they really wanted was reliability. They wanted video dial tone. They wanted to be able to sit down and have the thing work. And they don't care if it was at 384. If it worked every time, it would have been terrific. We still haven't solved that problem as an industry. If you are all in one manufacturer or all on one cloud, there are some cheats that have been put into the system to make it easier to walk in and start your meetings. But the real world is nobody's ever just on one cloud. We're on one platform now, we're on another platform in an hour, we're being invited by an outside company on a third platform later. Yes, there's some interoperability going on, but we still haven't fixed that frictionless thing. And I really think that's going to be a focus. I'd love to know what you guys think. I think it's going to be a focus in this decade of how do we make meetings start simple, even when there are these odd factors, like you haven't turned your camera on, or I think I'm meeting on one cloud, but the meeting's actually on another cloud. How do we take that all away, walk into the room and have it say, hi, start my meeting, and either from my voice or from my face or from my Bluetooth device or from a swipe of a code or something, the system says, I read your calendar, I got it, we're setting it up for you. I really think the first organization, company, hardware that gets to that point is going to win the decade, because I think that's really what people are looking for, that frictionless start. Thoughts, opinions? Am I right? Am I wrong?
Right, okay. Thoughts. We've had demonstrations with single click to join for I don't know how long. We've had demonstrations at Enterprise Connect with people saying, hey, Monica, start my video call. I get really annoyed with the lack of progress with all of this. All I really want is if my mobile phone goes with me everywhere, I want the system to give me an alert because I'm already authenticated on my mobile phone, and I take my mobile phone and I start my video conference from there, or I go to a room, or I go to my PC, and it automatically detects that I've got a better video device somewhere else. I can't understand why that's not available today. In terms of speech recognition and facial recognition, that's an interesting point. But then, of course, we've got legislation like GDPR, we've got the California Consumer Privacy Act, we've got the US Future of AI Act, we've got European work councils, all of which would probably have a different view as to whether or not an employee should have their voice pattern or their faces stored somewhere in the cloud. So I think data privacy might be a bit of a fly in the ointment there in terms.
Well,
of
I'm with you that it
speech.
needs to be. I'm with you that it needs to be some sort of opt-in process. It can't be something that happens automatically, that the camera just recognizes me. It has to be something where I go in and say, hi, I'm here now. Please recognize me. Please scrape my calendar. And I think one of the reasons that we haven't been able to do that, I'm smart enough to look at the invitation, see the URL, and realize it's a Microsoft Teams meeting, and realize in order for the endpoint in the room that I'm in to connect to Microsoft Teams, I need to invoke a gateway or a third party. I'm hoping we're going to get to the point where all of that, scrape the calendar, recognize the URL, and knowing I need to invoke something to make the connection is not something that people have to do anymore. And I'm hoping we're close to that. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Microsoft would say if you just use Microsoft stuff, everything would be great. Everything would just work.
Everybody would say that. It always works in the first person.
But one observation I was going to make, Dave, that I think is kind of funny about all of us who've been in the industry for a while, is that if you're into physical fitness, as an example, you notice that every time you get in better shape, every time you improve your running time, every time you can lift a little more weight or whatever it is you're doing to improve your physical condition, that becomes your new standard. And all of a sudden you feel like you're out of shape again, right? Yep. And it just continually happens to you. And I think we're doing the same thing here. If we stop for a second and we said, hey, if you had an H.323 endpoint and you were trying to make a call to some third party somewhere, that it was almost impossible to make that call without some IT support. And it was a very frustrating experience, even for those of us who were somewhat technical. It was very frustrating. Whereas today, the ability, a lot of that has all been eliminated. Firewall traversal, all that stuff has been kind of eliminated because of the cloud-based services. And now that the cloud-based services have started, we've got lots of vendors popping up, and that's created this new issue that we're having, which is which one are you using, and what's the quick way for the endpoint to switch quickly to make it convenient to hook in there. I think all that's being recognized. and it'll be addressed because it's not technically that complex to address it. But at the same time, it's always important to remember, wow, it's so much better than it was not that far back into the past.
I think that's
David,
a really good point. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, sorry, Robin. Go ahead, Robin.
No, I was just saying I think that's a great point, and it applies to so many areas of life. When you get to a certain point and then your expectations just keep going higher and higher. The other quick point I would raise when it comes to not only just doing a quick start video and getting things up and running, is just the quality of the video is sometimes really dependent upon your network connectivity. So maybe 5G is going to fix some of this, but boy, I tell you, yeah, sure, when you're in a closed environment in a company and all dedicated lines and everything's working fine, great. But when you start having your remote people dialing in, I mean, I'm still just kind of dumbfounded that we still haven't solved the last mile problem, and we still have quality issues just because of the network connectivity.
Yeah.
Tom, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, everyone's been making some awesome points. From my experience recently, now working at Poly, working with all these awesome SaaS players, is that most customers, not all, but most, consultants being the exception, they're probably on one company-provided platform most of the day. If you take like a consultant from any of the top consulting firms where they're on with different customers on a different day, they're going to be joining their customer's platform most likely. So joining a platform for a majority of your day and occasionally joining somebody else's platform is probably the norm today, but it may not be the norm tomorrow. There may be lots and lots of interconnections as companies work more and more together. And I almost view that this is almost like having separate cell phone networks that can't talk to each other except through, a wire and two tin cans. And that's not a great experience, because that's kind of what the industry is saying is good enough. And I don't think that's really good. I'd rather have a really nice endpoint that talks to each of them and optimizes its experience for each of those platforms and give the customer, whether they're a guest or a full-time user, the best of that Zoom meeting or Teams meeting or a log me in meeting and all the full functionality that they want, regardless of whether they're, like I said, a guest or a full-time user. I think that's where it really, rubber hits the road, and it helps realize, Robin's opening statements of, we keep not hitting the mark. We keep kind of moving on or moving the cheese or not fully realizing the potential. And I think we're getting there, right? As we digitize everything and all these new features and functionality become available, and they're just exposed through these awesome endpoints, whether it's a headset or a phone. Tim, I promise we'll get real awesome noise canceling in our next gen phone. I promise. And then all these new video endpoints and any endpoint that comes between here and then. I mean, there's so much potential. What people, in my mind, should really be paying attention to now is, what do they have and what do they want to deliver? Where do they want to go? Because it's changing so much. Price points are coming down. Penetration of video is up. I mean, look at what we're doing now. Just 2 or 3 years ago, this was, Ed's point, this was not possible. Here we are, all connected, remotely around the world. Very good quality audio, very great quality video, just collaborating like that.
Yeah, I was just saying
Almost
before we
for
started
free.
the call.
Almost for free.
Before we started the call, that I can't remember the last time I had a bad video conference. I thought it must have been some sort of desktop application on an older platform internal to one company, but externally, I live this as an end user. We had, we wouldn't do a video conference call with an outside company unless we had 4 days notice and a contact that we could test it with, because there was no guarantee that any of it would work. And now, we're all meeting in the cloud. It's an amazing perspective, and it's changing the way we look at this. And let's talk about that change just as one, next to the last topic for us today. Robin, I know you and your colleague Erwin have just presented a bunch of studies around the concept of metrics and business value. And I think that that's worth just a quick conversation now as we go into this decade. I remember sitting at my desk at one of the Fortune 50 companies running all this video stuff, looking at CDR. CDR was always good for me because whenever there was if I did, X thousands of calls in a month, the percentage was always, 4 nines or 3 nines of the calls that worked. It was only that small percentage of calls that didn't. Now, mind you, one of those will kill you, if it's a managing director or something, but it was always mostly successful. But the industry's moved on from measuring success by did the call connect and stay up. It had this brief marriage around the telepresence era with the idea of utilization. Are we utilizing things? And thankfully, that one didn't last very long. It was kind of debunked because the speakerphone sits on the conference room table for months without being used. But the day you need it, it's worth what you paid for it. And now video endpoints are inexpensive enough so that utilization goes away. People are now measuring business value. What am I getting from these tools? We're now on this team workflow. We're now on this, video everywhere for video for every call. The audio seems weird, as you pointed out. What are the trends around this idea of how do we measure if we're getting what we should be getting out of our collaboration and UC platforms and products?
Yeah, so that is definitely something that we spend quite a bit of time on here, looking at just success metrics and how are companies measuring that success. So what we see right now is as we talk to companies on what they're measuring, it's revenue increase, cost decrease, and then on the employee engagement side, it's efficiency gains. So how much more productive are we becoming? On the customer-facing side, so the contact center CX side, it's about customer ratings in addition to revenue and cost. So how much are our customer ratings going up? And looking at all different things like anything from CSAT to NPS to TNPS to customer effort score and so on. So they really look at those measurements as success. So I think that this definitely is an area, though, that vendors can help more on than they are. I think right now where we see enterprises doing their own analysis or doing analysis is that they're sort of doing it on their own. I think the vendors could provide a lot more data through analytics tools and even just basic utilization that can help them to see how well they're doing. If I were able to take a vendor tool and enter, okay, here's my baseline number for revenue, or here's my baseline number for cost or customer rating or efficiency, and here's what my goal is, and then have tools that can kind of help me to measure that as time goes on, that would really, really be useful. So I can do things like measure application utilization. I can see, for example, which departments are using video more than others. And now I can correlate that information with, well, how efficient are they? If I do post-call, post-video surveys, even internally of my employees, where they can tell me, did this save you any time? Did you do more on this call than you thought you were going to do? I can start correlating data and identify departments within my company who are incredibly productive. They're saving the company money, and wow, they're using video, for example, for sales calls, whereas this group over here is selling this product is not. And look at the difference in sales. If I can automate a lot of that, if the vendors can help me to automate that through just looking at utilization of technology and then doing a lot of correlation analysis, that would be golden. I could do things like looking at even sound quality as a way that you can make sure that calls are as efficient and as effective as possible. I talked to one company that was saying that they had agents who were saying, "Oh, we got disconnected from a call," and they put in some tools, thanks to the vendor that they were using, to actually monitor that. And we're finding they didn't get disconnected from the call; they hung up from the call because they didn't want to talk to that person or the sound quality wasn't good. And so those are some of the things we can start tracking, I think, and analyzing and measuring. Even just call to call, but more overall, I think it's looking at those business metrics like revenue, cost, efficiency, and ratings.
I like that idea with Robin, looking at efficiency and effectiveness, because the number of times that I've been on meetings where I think, is this really efficient? Everyone dialing in, 250 employees dialing in to listen to one person speak. And you think, well, wouldn't it have been better if that person just recorded a video on demand or sent out a newsletter or an email? And I guess that's where AI could come into effect and say, well, look, is it really effective? You've been speaking for an hour. You've had 250 participants on just listening to you. They're probably busy doing email or something else. Are they engaged? You can have a look, you could perhaps have a look at audio feeds and analyze that. How much of the time has Tim spent talking? How much of the time has Robin spent talking, or Ed, or Tom, or David? Does that measure engagement? Does that mean that we had a very collaborative or an engaging meeting? Those sorts of metrics are very interesting. But one thing I have found is return on investment is increasingly difficult to measure now, because that productivity, if I get 20 minutes of my time back, am I going to use my 20 minutes effectively, or am I going to have a coffee, or am I going to surf the web looking at, what Amazon's best deals are, or whatever it is? So
what makes you think me going for a coffee isn't effective?
Well, exactly. It could well be. You might need to have that downtime to defrag your mind for a bit, or to focus on something else. But I think that the old return on investment is a very difficult measure now. I think that's gone out the window. But I'd like to see better metrics that are more business related, as opposed to call detail records or how long I spent on a call. I think we're getting to a point in the next decade where we're going to move that reporting to a completely different level.
So Tom, is the guy who's building these systems and looking into the future, are you making strides in this area of trying to figure out better data, better metrics, better concept of utilization and ROI?
Yeah, David, I think the points that Robin and Tim are bringing up are absolutely valid, and they're definitely top of mind for us. I think the good news is the amount of data we can get from any single interaction, whether it's mine with yours, or this joint connection, or a 250-person all hands, one to many, is enormous. There's just so much information you can glean. What you do with that information is really the hard problem to solve. To Robin's point, is how do you take all these various bits, cobble them together in a meaningful way, and make it impactful for someone to do something with. That's where data analytics is really going to come down to its own. So our ability to report and move it somewhere, check, got it done. It's the ability to analyze it and do something with it. The point that Tim and Robin are making is the piece that where technology is really going to say. Now it's just, I think, again, just like AI and ML will help as we refine these learning models and get more succinct in what we really want as an organization. Because sometimes, to Tim's point, we don't always know what we want. We want something cool, but we're not sure what that is. The possibilities are endless. I think the good news is, like I said, there's tons of information out there. We're starting to learn, but really it's going to come down to what do companies really want? Do they want to know that people are paying attention, yes or no? Do you really want to know the truth, right?
Well, do we have one quick unfair plug, but what the heck, do we have an advantage if you're using one company's headsets and you're using one company's telephone sets and you're using the same company's room systems? Is there an advantage to gathering data that if you're just on the voice platform or the video platform or the mobile platform that you're not getting because you don't have all of it? I mean, we should have some unique abilities there to aggregate all of that capability, right? We,
Yeah.
Your we.
Yeah, I would answer that question yes and no. I mean, it's definitely an advantage if you control everything from the moment the word is spoken to the moment the word is heard, or from the moment you have an action on video to the moment that the action is seen. Clearly, there's an advantage, but it also can be a disadvantage because you don't control everything. You just never will. I don't control the network all the way through. I mean, if I'm calling on a mobile phone, you don't control all that. So the ability to stitch that information together, if you're our Poly headsets with Poly phones and Poly video devices connected to Zoom or Microsoft, and having those services work seamlessly together to deliver you, the paying customer, the experience that you want, is the critical part. So even though you may control it all, you might not be delivering what the customer wants. It's got to be about the experience and delivering that seamless package regardless of how you're connected, right? Whether you control all of it or not.
Yeah, that's one of the phrases that we're putting to bed now that 2019 is over and we're in a new decade. When you ask the customers what they want, their answer to you is they just want it to work. Terrific. Now we're going to have to spend the next decade trying to figure out what getting it to work means, because it means something different for all of the customers. So one last unfair question for everybody before we wrap this up today, and Ed, I'll go with you, so start thinking. It's the crystal balls question. It's my favorite one all the time. This video is obviously going to exist online for a really long time. We'll be able to. Somebody will come back and look at it, in 2029. Let's go through a couple of predictions here. What do you think are going to be the biggest movers and shakers in our space around the next decade? The technology, M&E, advancements. What would your top predictions be going forward, Ed?
Top predictions. Well, that's a good question. Well, I think, as I said when we first started the conversation, that the evolution of the cloud providers is still in its early infancy, and today that translates to Amazon and Microsoft, and then Google as a third. And so, the evolution of that, we haven't really seen all of the power that is available there, and the way software architecture is starting to work, and how it's all going to be fragmented up and broken. And that model is going to change. I still do believe firmly, though, that companies such as Poly in particular is in an excellent position to take advantage of whichever way it goes, because the endpoints are not going to change that much in terms of their relevance. They're going to change in terms of how they're done and how they're built and the technology that's used to do them. But the relevance of their importance to corporations and individuals is not necessarily going to go away, and they're really in a good position to capitalize on that. Now, of course, potential, as one of my favorite football coaches would say at UT, potential means we haven't done it yet, but it's always good for the potential to be there. So from that perspective, I think we'll see, the cloud providers. I don't see how that will not, narrow down to the big players that are there. Most likely will still be there in 5 years from now. The next step down is the endpoint providers, and then there's going to be some very important high value add ones, and Poly will be one of them. And then there will be a third tier of a whole bunch of noise level devices that will be coming from a lot of the pro AV players that see this market as large compared to what they were used to providing or playing in the pro AV world. But Poly's in a good position, Microsoft's in a good position, Amazon is in a good position, so I would see them. Now, Cisco is also a key player from an infrastructure perspective. They're a $50 billion infrastructure provider. They are in a sort of an interesting position, I think, as it relates to UC and C. It'd be interesting to see how that evolves, because you need to be a universal player in order to grow. And the question is can you sell WebEx in the context of the world with Microsoft Teams, while at the same time it would seem like the typical customer would want to use endpoints from Cisco to work with Cisco software, but not necessarily that would be their first choice if they were going to not be a Cisco shop. So it's kind of interesting to see how that dynamic works out. Obviously, there's a lot of smart people working there, and so there's an opportunity for them. We'll see if they figure it out. But I'm very confident about the Microsoft and the Poly thing and Amazon being there and where that's going to go. And Poly's in a good position.
Terrific, thank you. Tim, let's go to you next. What are your predictions for this decade?
Oh, decades! Good grief! I'm lucky if I can.
Good grief.
If I can actually, yeah, good grief! If I can, I'm lucky if I can predict 2 to 3 years out, let alone 10 years. I mean, good grief! Turn the clock back 10 years, and think: did we ever predict the iPhone was going to be as popular? I mean, Steve Ballmer would have said no. I can tell you what I think is going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years.
Oh.
I think we're going to see perhaps over the 10 years. I'll be lucky if I find anything that's going to be premise-based. So premise-based UC, premise-based conferencing, premise-based PBX. Mm-hmm. Over 10 years, I'll be very surprised if the majority of the market is still using premise-based anything. So next 2 to 3 years, I think we're going to see AI coming to the fore and augmenting a lot of human decision-making in the UCC space. A lot of that AI and ML, as we discussed, I think that's going to turn into innovative new features. I think we're going to see a lot of workflow automation, being able to take information from CRM systems and sales systems and marketing and all of those sorts of existing databases and applications and coming together in a team application environment. So we're going to see team collaboration becoming more of an integrative hub, joining that all together. Certainly more in terms of cloud-based suites. I think that's where the big money is. And I think what we're also going to see is the traditional UC vendors. I think there's going to be a real big crisis of prioritization. If you look at all of the UC vendors, they've got multiple platforms. Some are in the cloud, some aren't. Lots are on-prem. There's far too many platforms for them to support all of them, and too little resources to be able to effectively innovate on all of those platforms. So I think over the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see a rationalization of all those platforms, and you'll be lucky if you see 1 or 2 instead of the sort of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that many traditional UC vendors have. So
I was waiting for somebody to
cloud.
I was waiting for somebody to put consolidation on the top of their list, because there are an awful lot of small players in the space, and I don't know how economically viable that is. So,
well, the nice thing about what has happened is the economics have shifted, because if you look at the barriers of entry to become a UC player in this space, you had to have an awful lot of money to create all the hardware, create all the intellectual property. Now there's so much, you can stand on the shoulders of giants and leverage hyperscale platforms from Amazon, from Google, from Equinix data centers, from anybody else's data centers. You don't need to have to pay 500 million to start your own data center. You can use AWS or GCS or Azure and just run your software on top of it. So the dynamics have shifted completely. So the barriers to entry are lower, but for traditional UC vendors, it's going to be an extremely difficult problem because they've got so many different platforms out there.
Right.
Robin, your predictions?
I would say I respectfully disagree with Tim on the on-premises comment, because I do still talk to far too many companies who have absolutely no plans, to get rid of on-prem, or at least they will operate in a hybrid environment. So I still think you'll see companies. Obviously, everyone's going to move some things to the cloud. There's no doubt about that. I just don't know that you would ever get to a point where nobody's going to have anything on-prem. I think you'll have hybrid.
I said the majority, Robin. I said the majority over 10 years.
Oh, I thought you said I don't think we'll see any on-premises. I think it'll be very hard to.
Now,
I must have misheard. I thought you said it would be really hard. We wouldn't find any on-prem.
No, I'm sure there's plenty of fax machines still out there as well.
Then we're agreeing, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying, we talk to so many companies, and just based on what they're telling us, that's a tough one. But anyway, I think that we'll see a lot of improvement on just the experience of virtual work. Kind of what we were talking about here today, such that it's great, and in some cases even better than what you could get in person. So I think that's going to be a big shift. I think there's going to be a completely transformed customer experience over the next 10 years. Picking up a phone and calling a company is going to be gone. I think everything is going to be done over video, web chat, mobile devices, social media, those types of channels. I still think we will use verbal. I'm not saying we're not going to use verbal. We're going to want more than that. We're not just going to want to be on a phone. We're going to want to see someone, just like we are here today. We want the visual. We want the video. I think that's going to just extend to the customer experience. And also, beyond that, not just the channels, I think customer experience becomes much more personalized, much more contextual, much more intelligent, driven by some of the AI-enabled analytics that will come into play over the next 10 years for sure. I might even put forth that audio conferencing is dead in the next decade. I don't think we do audio conferencing. I think we do video conferencing, because once you start doing video conferencing consistently, you don't want to go backwards and go to audio conferencing unless, for some reason you're driving, or, you can't really be looking at a device while you're driving. I will put forth a bold prediction to say that 5G potentially solves the last mile connectivity issues that cause us a lot of problems. That might be a little too bold, but let's hope that if it's not 5G, it's something that solves connectivity issues at the last mile. And I would say the last thing would be just really good integration of collaboration workflow. So we're not switching around. You can be using different apps that are all integrated, but you're not doing a lot of task switching. Like that all becomes a lot more integrated.
Okay. Good predictions. Well, Tom, I'm going to give you the last word here, because you're actually building some stuff right now, so you know what's going to come out in the next 2 or 3 years. But what are your predictions for that?
Unfair advantage. Unfair advantage.
Sure. Although, Robin, I'll give you credit. I would say that, fortune favors the bold, right? So I agree that 5G unlocks a lot of potential that we've yet to see around the globe. I think I would 100% agree with that. And if I start kind of at the edge of connectivity where, anything that can be digitized will be digitized in terms of endpoints. So microphones get smaller and more advanced, speakers get smaller and more advanced, things that you wear on body become more lightweight and less intrusive. Phones continue to migrate and morph and connect more with mobility. Video endpoints get smaller and more integrated. The audio and video experiences that you get are going to be even fuller and fuller fidelity as we're able to compress data better over longer distances. I think we cloud, right? Anything in the cloud, you centralize complexity and you distribute simplicity. And I think that is very, very true for what you see happening in video and audio technologies and collaboration in general. The cloud is soon to be infinite in terms of CPU processing power and storage. I mean, think about it. If you need storage, you got it. You need CPU processing power, you got it. So the more we can push up there, the better off we're going to be. So I think you're going to see a lot more come out of the cloud. I also think that analytics, and I know we talk a lot about AI and ML, it's just getting unlocked right here, right now. The processors we see coming from some of these new vendors, the amount of AI, ML modeling they're able to store and run locally in hardware is incredible. These new next-gen chips that are coming, the lightweight power requirements, the low heat requirements, we're going to be able to stuff those in things that you've never dreamed of. And it's right here, right now. I'm talking 12 to 18 months. You're going to see these next-generation endpoints coming out that are going to enable all kinds of new experiences that you've yet to see. And I think getting back to what Robin and Tim and Ed have been talking about is, have we ever really fully realized this? Well, probably not. Will we ever? Probably not, because folks like me keep moving the cheese, right?
Yep.
Well, those are some terrific predictions. This is a great conversation. I really got a lot out of it. I appreciate it. Let's go once more around with everybody. If anybody wants to reach out to you, just give us your email or your Twitter handle or whatever you prefer. But Ed, how would somebody get in touch with you if they wanted to?
Well, you can send me an email at ed@moreinsightstrategy.com.
Thank you, Ed. Tim?
Yeah, so I'm tim.banting@ovum.com, and my Twitter handle is tbanting.
Thank you. Robin?
Yep, it's just easy. Robin at Nemertes, NEMERTES.com. Twitter is rgarris.
Terrific. And Tom, you get the last word?
Sure. I'm tom.puorro@poly.com or t.puorro at Twitter.
Terrific. Well, thank you for joining me, all four of you. I appreciate it very much. Great conversation. Thank you to UC Today for giving us the platform. We're happy to be part of the launch of this new virtual UC Summit, and we'll see you the next time. Take care.